Here on the ground, there continues to be absolute confusion with regard to the movement. In fact, I would call it the mass exodus of migrant labor. Now the government has issued a new directive asking for the labor to stay exactly where it is. And while this would make sense in itself, this has come somewhat late, to make an understatement. So on the roads now, people are still walking, and some have come from other states, but they're being asked to go back. And the circular also says that their employers, their contractors will have to pay them full wages, and there will also be temporary shelters where they will be given a place to stay, as well as food and rations. But on the ground, most people have not heard about this circular. So in a contrast to the kind of images we saw last night, where we saw a complete deluge of people, behind me you can see now just a handful of policemen, police officers and barricades. Every few 100 meters we see barricades like this, and people are being asked in fact to turn back. And those who have already migrated are being asked to go and stay in temporary shelters. But we would like to say that this is creating in some ways even more confusion, because there are gaps in the messaging. Here are the 5 key mistakes that the government, both central and the involved state governments, have made in the entire handling of this. When the lockdown took place, how did the lockdown not plan for 45 million, take a look at that number, 45 million migrant laborers, because that's the number that the 2011 census puts for the transient migrant labor workforce in India. That's mistake number 1. How do you lock down a country without anticipating that this could happen, that migrant labor will panic and they will wonder, where do we get our next meal from? Because most of the people we met, and I'm going to keep giving you a sense of the place we're at, most of the people we met said that our employers, our contractors are simply not going to pay us any money, even if you issue an order saying that they should. So the first mistake, not remembering India's poor. If I can ask my camera to just come this side, you can see that there are just a smattering of vehicles today compared to the deluge that we saw yesterday. The second mistake, for 3 days we allowed, as a nation, we allowed poor people to walk these streets on foot, sometimes hundreds of kilometers, with babies on their head, holding little children, women and children on the street, and there was no response. It's only after relentless pressure, here at Mojo we have focused hard on these stories, and it's only after relentless pressure that the government actually paid attention to this and buses were promised. In fact, in our very first report we asked for the army to be called in to manage the movement of these many people, but that did not happen. So the second mistake was that for 3 days you just looked away from the problem as horrific images emerged from these streets. Mistake number 3, you announce buses. Thank you. We say thank you that you provided transport facilities. After all, if our middle class and upper middle class can be evacuated from cities across the world, why not our poor? But then when you announce buses, you do not actually have people on the ground, no policemen, no paramilitary, no army, nobody to actually organize the movement of these people, maybe put up pickets every few 500 meters, ask people to get into single file and ensure that only 100 at a time with a 1 meter distance between them get onto the bus. Surely this is common sense. So this was mistake number 3. And mistake number 4, you have issued a new directive, well-intentioned, that says that you must ensure that landlords don't evict migrant workers, that contractors and employers continue to pay them. But every single person I met on the streets here saying, how will I get this enforced? You think I'm now going to go back and fight with the person who used to give me a few hundred rupees a day? So is this order implementable? This needs communication between governments and those who employ. The people employed cannot go back and have this fight and then go to police stations and say that, look, our employer has thrown us out. And of course, when it comes to the role of the police, person after person is talking about police violence, lathis from police asking them to go back. And mistake number 5, shutting down public transport. India is the only country in the world, when we look at other countries that have gone into lockdown, where public transport has been shut. Now what this does is, we understand the intention behind it, but what it does is it means poor people have to keep walking. And right now if you're sending them back, How are they going to get back? We've met people from Uttarakhand, from Rajasthan, from different states. Someone came from Punjab. How are they going to go back? Perhaps that's why today we see Punjab modifying the rules. Punjab has just today issued a decision that the people who work in small home-driven industries will be allowed to work as long as the workers can be kept there safely. So in this way, every government is going to have to readapt. And please do reconsider the shutting down of public transport. Essential staff and poor people are not being able to move. I'm just going to recap these 5 mistakes. A policy that did not factor in the poor, ignoring the poor for 3 days, then announcing buses without having anybody on the ground to oversee the mobilization and the movement of these crowds. 4th, issuing a directive that doesn't explain how you are going to ensure that employers continue to keep these poor people in employment. And 5, the shutting down of public transport. But for the moment, the scenes here, and I leave you with them, the scenes here are of barricades and shut roads, and workers, the last of the workers are being asked to go in buses, but otherwise the workers are being asked to go back. And there is a lot of confused messaging that is taking place here on the ground.